The topic of this video is on congruent triangle proofs. So everything that we've done this unit has led us up to this point where we are now ready to prove triangles are congruent. So just to review a few things, remember that when you are given a proof, you will always have some information that is always given at the beginning, and you will also have right after that what it's asking you to prove. Okay? When you set up your proof, your givens will always be at the very top of this proof. So it'll always be maybe one line. It could be 3 lines. It just kind of depends on how much is given to you. So you will list those on the left, and then your reason on the right will always say given, okay, for however many things you listed. Your proof statement, whatever is written here, will always be right here on this line. The y is dependent. For these proofs, your y will always be one of these, okay? So, and this is also a lovely thing because these are your checkpoint for what you've talked about in your body part here, okay? So if you're gonna say angle, side, angle, then you should have 3 congruency statements. You should have an angle statement. You might have a second angle statement, and then you should have, you should have a side segment. And the order doesn't exactly matter, but you should be able to say, I talked about an angle, I talked about an angle, and I talked about a side. And then the order really is dependent on the picture. And the same thing goes for SSS. Like you should be able to say, oh, I talked about 3 sides in the body of my paragraph. The why is definitely the harder part for you. You have to figure out why you're able to say that and what information you can gather, okay? But these right here are going to be how you finish, those will go right here, how you finish all of your triangle congruence proofs. So let's take a look at one. Let's give it a try. So I have at the top, if I were to highlight here, I have 1, 2, 3 givens. So I can write PQ is congruent to ST, and that's given. And I'm going to stop there because I want to go up to my picture and I want to label that. Say PQ is here and ST is here. So I'm going to label that one. And then I'm going to go to my second given. QR is congruent to TR. So I'm going to go up to my picture. QR is right here, labeling with 2 because it's different, and TR is here. And I'm going to write given. And then R is the midpoint of PS. And that's also given. So midpoint means the middle. So we're saying that this point is the middle of the longer segment. So if it's the middle, that means that PR and SR are going to be the same thing. So I get to label that or say that next. PR is congruent to SR, and that's because of the definition of midpoint, right? I knew what the word midpoint meant, so I was able to say that. And now if I look above, I'm able to say this last statement. If I were to highlight that in blue, this is going to go right here. I'm able to say that triangle PQR is congruent to triangle STR. And if I look above, I've talked about a side, I've talked about a side, and I've talked about a side. I also can see in my picture, I've labeled a side, I've labeled a side, I've labeled a side. So at this point, I can say side, side, side. All right, let's look at a different type of proof. In this proof, I have 2 givens. So I have this given here, and I have a second given here. So X is the midpoint of VZ, and that's given. So I'm going to, so your X is the midpoint, okay? And the other one is X is the midpoint of WY, and that's given. So again, remember that the definition means middle. So if X is the midpoint of VZ, that means that this is congruent to this. So that's going to be the first thing I'm going to say, is that VX is congruent to ZX. And that's because of the definition of a midpoint. I'm also going to say, because the second given was the second midpoint, I'm also going to say that WX is congruent to YX. And that's also because of the definition of a midpoint. So now I'm looking for one more thing, right? And, maybe you're thinking a side, but I can't say anything about a side. I don't know anything about these sides. And I don't know anything other than, actually, I can see that I know something about this angle right here and this angle right here. And when those two triangles are touching, the existence of potential vertical angles exists, and that's what that is. Please remember that you cannot use angle X because angle X could be 4 different angles. So I'm going to say angle VXW is congruent to ZXY, and that's because they are vertical angles. Now I've talked about 3 things. If I look, I've given an angle, I've given a side, and I've given a side. So now I just have to look at the order. So if I start here and move around, if I do that, I hit a side, an angle, and then a side. So triangles VWX and ZYZ are congruent by side, angle, side. All right, I wanted to do maybe 2 more. Let's see here. Let's do, actually maybe just 1 more. Let's do this one. This is a nice one. Okay, so 2 givens here, given 1 and given 2. So I'm going to go ahead and write those. QR bisects angle PQS, and that's given. So remember, bisect is going to mean something. So I'm going to highlight this because I'm going to attack this when I'm done with my givens. And then I've been given that angle PRQ is congruent to angle SRQ. All right, so remember when we're finding these angles, PRQ, we have to be in the middle letter, okay? So if I'm trying to figure out where that is, it's by the middle one. So if I were to identify that angle right there, it is this one right here. And on the other side, SRQ in the middle is going to be this one. So that angle is congruent to that angle. All right, let's go back to this idea of QR bisects P or PQS. So it's bisecting this top angle right here. So that must mean that this angle and this angle are congruent. So I'm going to say that next. Angle PQR is congruent to angle SQR, and that's because of the definition of bisect, or angle bisector is fine too. So I'm only looking for one more thing, and it can't be an angle. It has to be a side because angle, angle, angle is not a congruency theorem. And then I see it. I see it right here. They're both sharing this side. So I'm going to say QR is congruent to QR. And remember, that's because of the reflexive property. So now I have everything I need. I said something about I've got an angle, and a side. And if I start where there's nothing marked and move my way around, I see that I hit an angle first, and then a side, and then an angle. So I'm going to say triangle PQR is congruent to triangle SQR by angle, side, angle. So the more practice you do with these, the better they will get. You always will have a word bank at the bottom to help you kind of think through your thoughts here. But remember, these middle parts, and I should make that very clear, like these two right here, these could be flip-flopped. It doesn't matter which one comes first and which one comes second. You just have to have the givens at the top and your triangle statement at the bottom. All right? Like always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.